Good day, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the final episode of the Ask Abhijit show for this year, Ask Abhijit 225. I hope everybody is doing great. So, as always, I've taken a whole bunch of questions that you have asked in the comments, and I'm going to take as many of these as I can over the next couple of hours. Before that, let's see who all is there on the live chat. I can see Anant Pai, Astasi Aro, Rudra, Krishna Govinda, Alfred Raghunath Buldev Rai from Suriname, from Suriname is Netherlands. Anant Pai once again, Vivek Singh, Galab Dekha, Lost Child, Kapalin, Ansh, Shubham Adhikari, Prakhar Gupta, Enlightened Being, Debosman Das Gupta, Subbu XZ, Pranay Paul from Kolkata, Vivekananda Panda, Nilesh Patil, Gautami, Geopolitical Dubey, hello, Mrinal Bhatt, Shreyash Dighe, Lost Child, Udbhav Sharma, Xmas, Ymas, Zemus, Hedgehog's Dilemma, Dinesh Hariharan, Bai, Yash, Enlightened Being. Who else? Sudhindra Desai, Jayavardhan Sain, Devvrat Singh, Vivek Singh, Arush Sinha, Unni M. Ajaya, Ansh, Vishal Agarwal, Vardhan Rana, Manoj Kakashi, Ubendran, My Cat's Birthday Party, Feminist Slayer, Kant, McLevin, Mr. Red Riot, Om Prakash, Vipreet, Jagdish Mali, I am Kaushik, Dust of Stars, Kaya S, Harsh Singh Bhumihar, Panther, Quiet, OK, Mr. 88ers, Muskan, Choraria, Bhushan, Pratham Agarwal, Komal, and so many other people. So, welcome to you all. Thank you so much for being on this final episode of Ask Abhijit for this year. And we're going to continue next year. So, let's go and take a look at the questions. What questions have you all asked me? Let's see. This is by Balram Putin and Siddharth Gupta. Raising your standards video when? Also, when is the bookstore? And I am 20 and pursuing CA. I respect you immensely. Thank you. And I'm inspired by your saying never lower your standards. But recently I've realized that I have actually lowered my standards greatly. How do I raise them? Okay, so this is something I keep saying, isn't it? Raise your standards. Keep raising your standards. So the question is, how do you raise your standards? What do I mean by raise your standards? What standards are to be raised and so on? Now, this is not something I can explain over 2-3 minutes or over the course of one 15-minute video. Raising your standards is a whole big deal. I mean, it's about changing, transforming yourself entirely. It's got to do with mindset. It's got to do with your habits, your routine, your objectives, your goal, your approach, your thought process, all of that. So it's not possible to explain how to raise your standards over one video. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a whole series of videos starting the first week of next year. How to raise your standards. I think that's the way to do it. And we can go on a journey together about in raising our standards. How about that? So that's what I'll do. I'll create a series of videos next year, starting next week, essentially. How to raise your standards. That's what I'll do. So yeah, hopefully that addresses that issue. Now the bookstore will take somewhat longer. I mean, yeah, it's on my to-do list. Won't happen very soon, but I haven't forgotten it. So thank you for the reminder. Right. Okay, Vikram Geopolitical says, what were the most significant geopolitical moments of the year, according to you, of the year 2024? Hey, look, yeah, that's a great question. A lot happened in 2024 geopolitically. First of all, the year began with essentially a super cycle of elections, right? More than 60-70 countries held elections, and more than 4 billion people were impacted by this. I'm not sure if 4 billion people participated and actually cast their votes, but they were impacted by this. The results impacted their lives. So some of the most important elections were obviously the Indian election, in which Prime Minister Modi secured a historic third term as India's Prime Minister, and that obviously has helped us have continuity in our policies, internal and external policies. Then you had the election in the United States, the presidential election, in which Donald Trump made a historic and dramatic comeback, and he won the presidency despite all kinds of controversies that have pursued him. ever since he became a politician. Then there were parliamentary elections in the EU, the rise of the far right, what they call the far right, and now increasing polarization, essentially, what uh, the way some media commentators like to put it. But you had that, you had elections in Taiwan, which obviously have significant implications for China and the rest of the world. So you had this entire cycle of elections in 2024 that has obviously had a geopolitical impact, and it's going to have a continuing geopolitical impact. Now, we can't discuss geopolitics without discussing the ongoing conflicts. And the major conflict, two major conflicts one can think of. One is the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war, and Russian forces have been consolidating their gains. They have been gaining ground. There have been escalating casualties on both sides. We don't know what the numbers are. The numbers don't come out. They'll come out in history books 20, 30 years down the line, but right now we don't know the numbers. So there's been all this going on, the Russia-Ukraine war. It's kind of a stalemate, so to say, right now. It's in a slow war phase. And yeah, maybe it will be resolved hopefully next year once Donald Trump comes to power and things happen. If he wants those things to happen, we will see about that. So there's the Russia-Ukraine war, and there's weakening support now for Ukraine. I mean, the world kind of seems to have tired of this war. The media seems to have tired of it. Various leaders and various nations seem to have tired of it. And even the United States seems to be kind of looking for ways and means of getting out of this war. And that's why I say that maybe once Trump comes to power, takes office, things will change. But now there are fiscal limitations that are being imposed on Ukraine and so on. So the EU also seems to be really wary of this war. So that's the Russia-Ukraine war. Then there have been tensions in the Middle East. Obviously, we know what happened, right? The year before this year, the Hamas strike on the terrorist attack on Israel, and then that has led to a war, the Israel-Hamas conflict in Gaza. So that has intensified over the war, massive casualties and all that, warnings of humanitarian collapse, humanitarian crisis, all that. So that's an ongoing thing. Then there's so this still has the potential of escalating into a wider regional conflict. Obviously, the Houthis are involved, Hezbollah is involved from Lebanon, Iran is involved. There have been strikes and counter strikes between Israel and Iran as well. So that's an ongoing situation, one of the major conflicts. One of the surprising things for some would have been the overthrow of the Assad government, Assad regime. So after years of civil war, which started in the early 2010s, Syrian rebels, they're called rebels, they successfully toppled the government of President Bashar al-Assad. And Mr. al-Assad fled to Moscow with his family, which ended about 5 decades of family rule, Assad family rule in the country. And this is going to create a whole new situation, a whole new balance of power in the Middle East, in the West Asia region. The so-called rebels who have won after the army inexplicably collapsed. These rebels, they are nothing but rebranded Al-Qaeda, ISIS terrorists, and their leader, Mr. Al-Julani himself, is previously wanted terrorist with about $10 million or something bounty on his head, officially designated as a terrorist by the US. But now he puts on a nice blazer and everything changes. So he's now a proper world leader. So there's that. And then obviously there's the situation in Myanmar, the Burmese civil war that's ongoing, that's going on. And there is foreign interference in the region, which is spilling over into India. There is the Manipur situation, which is connected to the Bangladesh, to the Burma situation, the Burma civil war. There is the US funded Project K going on, the project to create an artificial Christian nation out of parts of Burma, Manipur, Mizoram, and Bangladesh. That's going on. So yeah, there is that. There has been expansion of NATO this year. Sweden officially joined NATO, became the 32nd member of NATO, and this was perhaps a strategic response of the NATO alliance to the evolving security situation in Europe. Then there has been a pact between Russia and North Korea, which is significant, which is interesting. Okay, it's a notable development. So Russia and North Korea signed a mutual defense agreement. which is a strategic agreement. It's an alliance, and North Korean soldiers are actually now deployed in Ukraine, right? So that's something that has been interesting. You can see a whole realignment of the global geopolitical balance of power. So we can see the emergence of what the West would call an axis, the Russia, China, Iran, North Korea axis. Then there have been various geopolitical shifts. One thing that hasn't really shifted is China's assertiveness in the South China Sea vis-a-vis Taiwan. The Chinese have been more aggressively asserting their claims, doing those naval operations using various kinds of naval craft, whether it's the Chinese Navy or the Coast Guard or whatever. And this led to several violent confrontations in the region, including some situations that happened with the Philippines. Uh, then the India-China relationship is something has seems to have changed for the better. So that's a significant geopolitical development for this year. After a nearly 5-year border standoff, the nations seem to have reached some kind of agreement or understanding, uh, or some kind of mutual resolution. So the standoff seems to have ended. The troop positions have changed. Both have withdrawn. And Prime Minister Modi met with President Xi Jinping for the first time in several years, and definitely signals better relations. And both the nations have agreed to revive bilateral dialogue mechanisms, and there seems to be some kind of push towards discussing the border issue and trying to find ways of resolving that. Now, one cannot discuss what happened geopolitically this year without discussing the Bangladesh coup. So, the democratically elected government of Sheikh Hasina was overthrown by a so-called students' protest. It was not really the students' protest that overthrew her. It was the army that effected a coup and gave her 30 minutes, 45 minutes to leave the country. So she had to flee to India, and a puppet government that is controlled by the US has come to power, and the figurehead is Mr. Mohammed Yunus. And yeah, and this is a very strongly anti-India government. So Bangladesh essentially has kind of become East Pakistan again. So what India achieved in 1971 has been undone by the Americans, right? So this is all part of the American repositioning of their power projection in the subcontinent region. Um, Economically, the global economy remained weak. China seems to have be in the process uh, of an economic downturn, and this obviously will have ripple effects across the world. Uh, Countries now are kind of not really visibly in a panic mode, but every nation seems to be understanding that you cannot remain completely interconnected and dependent with the global economy. Interconnection is good, but you can't be dependent on other nations for your vital needs. So, many most major powers are now seeking to reduce global dependencies, and they are seeking to prioritize national security over purely economic considerations. Every major nation is trying to figure out how to create its own supply chains that are not dependent on others, and so on. So that's something that's happening, and it's a consequence of the entire cycle that started with the Ukraine war. So there is that. There is a high cost of living in various nations, and this obviously has had outcomes electorally. Various incumbents have faced challenges. Various governments that did come to power came to power with less numbers and so on. So the economy has really battered. And obviously, this is the age of AI, the age of drones, the age of UFOs. So that's something that's going on, and so on. And the EU, the European Union, passed an Artificial Intelligence Act, which is a legal framework for AI. And the objective is to regulate the development and deployment of AI. So it's the world's first comprehensive legal framework for AI, and the EU has passed that. So we are now firmly in the age of AI. Everything is AI enabled, and also the age of robotics in drones and space exploration. SpaceX has made huge strides in space exploration. So all of this is kind of, you could say, the highlights reel of this year. geopolitically. Okay, anonymous scientist and Vikram Geopolitical ask. China has recently unveiled its sixth generation fighter jet, which is absolutely mind boggling. Not only this, but they have also revealed the WZ-9 Divine Eagle unmanned stealth drone. What should India do now? We are lagging behind. What do you think? In how many years will we be able to build marvels like these? China has unveiled its sixth generation fighter jets, and what India has is the 4.5 generation Rafale. China did it before the US and Russia. What are your thoughts on this? We are still planning to launch the fifth generation fighter jet of our own in 2035. Will we ever be able to cover up the gap between the defense capabilities of China and India? Will the West speed up their launching of the sixth generation fighter jets, of their own sixth generation fighter jets? So, first of all, I would like to congratulate China for this superb achievement. I mean, it's not easy to achieve what they've achieved. They've done it before the US. I'm not sure if the US has a working prototype of a sixth generation fighter jet. Maybe they do. Maybe it's secret or whatever. But the Chinese have gone ahead and revealed it. They've actually flown it. So a great achievement by China. And this is what happens when you put in decades of incredibly hard work and you're completely focused on your national priorities. So good job, China. I would like to congratulate our Chinese friends for what they've achieved. Now, what about India? What about the US? What about Russia? I'm sure the US has a sixth generation fighter jet program. The Russians also have it. Uh, and sixth generation fighter jets, they have kind of more better capabilities than fifth generation fighter planes. So more stealth features, more near space features. They can communicate with networks not just on the earth but also with satellites and so much more. Futuristic weapons and all that. They will have robotic wingman aircraft. They'll have drones that go with them and so much more. So that's a sixth generation fighter plane. The Chinese have done that. The Americans will definitely be pursuing this, whether we know it or not, whether it's revealed or not. And the same can be said about Russia. Now, when it comes to India, we are working on the fifth generation AMCA, Advanced Medium Combat Aircraft project, like it's mentioned over here. Uh, the first, it is scheduled to come into operation sometime in the mid 2030s, and we are right now in the mid 2020s, so a decade to go for that. And only then will we have a fifth generation fighter plane. The Chinese have two different fifth generation fighter planes. The Americans have the F-35, uh, and the Turks are working on a fifth generation fighter plane, and there are various other nations that are doing this. The Russians have the Sukhoi 57, which is a project that India was involved in, but for various reasons, India pulled out of it. Uh, so India will catch up with the fifth generation technology sometime in the mid 2030s, if things go well. And we can also start working certainly in parallel on sixth generation fighter plane technologies. We certainly can do that on the drawing board and uh, create small scale models and all that. But the main problem that India is facing when it comes to fighter planes is jet engine technology. That's the problem that India is facing, and that's an Achilles heel. Okay, that's something. See, the jet engine is what powers your plane. You may have the best designs in the world, the best airframes and all that stuff, but if you don't have the jet engine technology, then you will forever be dependent on somebody else. And I think we are buying the American General Electric F404 jet engine for the Tejas fighter jet, and the Americans are withholding that right now as a means of squeezing India, arm twisting India. So the entire Tejas fighter plane program can essentially be shut down if the Americans don't supply these jet engines. So that's the conundrum India faces. So I would say that India needs to acquire jet engine technology, acquire it, develop it, buy, beg, borrow, steal, do whatever it takes, but get it done. The best solution is to pay whoever is willing to sell it to you. Pay whatever they're asking for, just get the technology, get the ability to manufacture the entire jet engine 100% indigenously in-house in India. Pay for it if required. I'm not sure why it takes so long. I mean, there are countries that are definitely willing to pay for technology. Obviously, they will charge you an arm and a leg. It's not going to be cheap, but it's not like India doesn't have money, right? We have money for all kinds of schemes, freebie schemes, and I'll not name them, but you know what I mean. We have the money. The question is, will somebody be willing to sell jet engine technology? There has been talk of the French Safran getting involved and helping India with the Kaveri jet engine. So that's an option. The Americans will never sell you 100% of the technology. They'll always leave something out. The French may perhaps be more amenable to selling 100% of jet engine technology. Maybe not the best technology that they have, but maybe one generation behind, which is okay, which is fine. So we should pursue that. And obviously, then there is Russian technology. The Sukhoi 30 fighter plane, the Sukhoi 35 also uses a Russian jet engine called the Saturn AL-31 jet engine. And it's a pretty good engine. Uh, and even the Chinese planes like the J-10, the J-20, they also use the Saturn AL-31 engine. So maybe we can talk to Russia. How much do you want us to pay for a full transfer of technology? And it's not like we are Russia's adversary of any kind. So we are a friendly nation. I am sure the Russians will be willing to sell it for a certain price, or maybe the price is geopolitical. We don't quite know, but we have to find a way of doing this. Uh, and obviously, even if we buy the full technology, a full transfer of technology from one of these nations, we should still continue developing the Kaveri jet engine completely indigenously. Obviously, we can use learnings from other programs, but we need to do that. And the Kaveri engine, no matter how long it takes, we need to make it work. So the Chinese W whatever jet engine that they use right now, it has taken decades, at least 30-35 years. They've been trying to develop it. There have been lots of setbacks, but they persevered. When it comes to the Kaveri jet engine, we have stopped it and started it multiple times. There have been times when the project was abandoned and then it was restarted after a few years. That sort of nonsense. Jet engine technology takes time to develop. It takes a lot of iterative improvements, lots of cumulative lessons learned from various kinds of fields. And what we need to do is to invest in a material science program in India. I cannot think of a single Indian research institution that has a a, a world-class material science program. Material science is developing exotic and highly resilient materials that can withstand temperature, that will melt steel, single crystal nickel blades and whatnot. You need that sort of technology to be able to develop the components of the jet engine, and to be able to develop components that can withstand incredibly high temperatures and pressures for incredibly large amounts of time. So that's a process that takes years. So we have to keep persevering with this. So we are definitely far behind the Chinese and even the fifth generation fighter planes that the Americans and whoever else, Russians, have developed it. Uh, the main Achilles heel for us is the jet engine technology. We don't have it. We need to find it somehow, acquire it somehow. The Chinese tried reverse engineering the Russian jet engine, but eventually, through whatever process, they've been able to develop their own jet engine technology. I'm sure it's not great yet, but at least they're able to use their own jet engines. So that's the main issue that India needs to address right now in the coming, let's say, 5-10 years: jet engine technology. In the meanwhile, we should also work on unmanned aircraft technology. We have a working Kaveri engine that can power unmanned aircraft, drones, the Ghatak drone, and so on. Uh, Dry tests are going to happen soon in Russia. We don't even have a test bed in which we can test jet engines. We don't even have that. So I think India needs to wake the hell up. Uh, I'm sure the future can be bright if the right steps are taken. So let's hope for the best. That's what I can say. Okay, Vikram, geopolitical and Kirdagama Rose. Kirk. Okay, whatever that is. Pakistan is in talks with China to get 40 fifth generation fighter planes. This will give Pakistan a huge edge over India. China has parked 200 J-20 fighter planes on our border. So, by your logic, or as Stalin said, quantity has a quality of its own. The government apparently is still sleeping over the purchase of 114 fighter jets over the past 2 decades. Okay. So, yes, look, China is a geopolitical adversary of India. Right now, things may be going better. The relationship may be on a better track right now because of mutual concerns with much more powerful nations and so on. But geopolitically, from the logic of strategy, China and India, because of the fact that they are two very powerful nations, not equally powerful, but quite powerful nations, and they have a very long common shared border, such nations can only be adversaries long term. The same applies to Russia and China. So China will definitely want Pakistan to become a more powerful nation. That will obviously give them a tremendous amount of leverage in their negotiations and dealings with India if Pakistan becomes more powerful than what it is right now. And one of the ways of doing it is to supply Pakistan fighter planes that are superior to what India has. So it may happen Pakistan may acquire whatever number it is, 40 or whatever, fifth generation fighter planes from China. And that will give them a tremendous advantage because the Indian Air Force is still mired in the 20th century mindset of emphasizing dogfights and pilot skills over futuristic 21st century technology. So yeah, it will definitely give Pakistan a very large advantage, a very big and significant and considerable advantage over India. Now, it's not like we could not see this coming. This could have been seen coming 20 years ago, even 10 years ago. So, what have we been doing about it? Uh, yeah, the purchase of 114 fighter jets. I think the government has decided to prioritize building our own indigenous fighter planes over purchasing 114 or whatever number from abroad. And as a stopgap measure, we have purchased 36 Rafales from France. So, it's a small number, it's not a very large number. It is quality, but definitely not quantity. So, what should India do? We need to obviously ramp up the production of the Tejas fighter plane, but you can't do that when you don't have jet engines. And we are purchasing jet engines from the Americans and they are withholding these. So, we are in a very tight spot right now. Uh, as a stopgap measure or as a countermeasure, one could perhaps modify the Tejas fighter plane to be able to use the Russian Saturn AL-31 or whatever engine. It's a different kind of engine. It's uh, it's used in the Sukhoi. The Sukhoi has two of those engines, so maybe we could cut down our dependence on the Americans and go for the Saturn engine that the Russians have. Perhaps that would definitely require modifying the airframe and whatever of the Tejas. But you know what? At least the Russians won't withhold uh, the jet engines from us. So India needs to find a solution to the Tejas issue. And once that jet engine solution is found, we need to find ways of ramping up the production. Right now, what's the production rate? 12 per year, 18 per year. I'm not sure what the rate is. It's not enough. We need to double it at least. We can maybe create a second plant with the same kind of assembly line, which can output the same number as the existing plant. So then we can double the production rate of the Tejas fighter plane. And then over a few years, we can have significant numbers. So let's say Pakistan has 40 or 50 fifth generation fighter planes and China has whatever number. Let's say we have 300 Tejas fighter planes. Then the quality and quantity kind of offsets each other. And when it comes to Pakistan, you don't even need fighter planes actually. Drones can do the job, high quality unmanned aerial vehicles. You can mass produce them and use that to kind of blanket Pakistan in case of war. And you can hit whatever number of targets you want with that. And drones are low visibility, hard to detect, especially if they fly low. And you can send them in as many numbers as you want. Then the Pakistanis in this hypothetical scenario can shoot as many missiles as they want, expensive missiles to bring the drones down, but we just can keep throwing more drones. And that can achieve whatever effect you want. So you don't need fighter planes when you're dealing with a nation that doesn't have a large geographical distance from India like Pakistan. The furthest point in Pakistan is just a couple of hundred kilometers from India, roughly, give or take. Okay, so Pakistan can be easily dealt with using just drones. So I don't know if the army, air force are thinking along these lines, but Hopefully they are, but this is the 21st century. We can already see the way the rules of the war, the rules of warfare have completely been changed by the introduction of these new technologies. So we should also do that. So Pakistan can be dealt with using drones. Obviously, if they send fifth generation fighter planes into India on an airstrike, then we need to find ways of dealing with those. And obviously, that's a problem. It's a technological problem. It's a military problem that the armed forces need to solve. So once again, it all comes down to fighter jet engines. We need to acquire jet engine technology, and we also need to very seriously look at using the various ways of using drones and robotics in warfare. But at the end of the day, we would also want to have our fifth generation fighter plane as soon as possible. The main problem is the jet engine. Once we have that, we can test fighter plane designs and do whatever's required. And we need to very much take inspiration from SpaceX. So when it comes to, like, they have completely transformed the way the space race is being looked at. They are the number one rocket manufacturer in the world, whether it's governments or private organizations, doesn't matter. And they are launching rockets like there's no tomorrow. 100 plus launches every year, every week, like two or three launches. And they have come such a long way. In just 2006 that they almost went bankrupt as a company, and their first two rocket launches failed. And finally, the third one succeeded. That's how the company remained viable. But the technological progress they've done over the past 5 6 years is incredible. They have developed Starship from almost scratch. If you look at the video of the first test flight of Starship, it doesn't even look like a rocket. That is 2018 or 2019. And see where they are today. I think it was 2019 that they first launched Starship, which looked like it can. And look at Starship today. They have built up the technology. They've developed the technology so incredibly fast. So we can't be all bureaucratic and slow paced when it comes to these matters. We have to do these things as fast as possible. So hopefully India learns from SpaceX. Okay, Mr. 88ers and Vikramaditya Rathore ask questions about China and a dam. China is going to build the world's largest dam near India's border in Tibet. It's obvious that India can't do a thing against this decision, but this dam does put the northeast states of India in grave danger of possible flood scenarios. What steps can the government take to prevent such a possible catastrophe? Also, from a neutral POV, why is China even building the dam in the first place? Is it one of the ploys to keep India in check? Why are the Chinese playing double games against India by installing a dam on the Brahmaputra in Tibet? On the one hand, they are taking steps towards border de-escalation, and we thought there was some tiny hope for improvement in ties after the 2020 Galwan clashes. It seemed due to the trade war and increasing pressure from the US, China would inch closer to India and BRICS would get stronger. But as they say, never ever trust the Chinese, even if their economy stalls and they become weaker. So what's the deal? What is the deal is the question. So, yes, the Chinese have announced plans to build the world's largest hydroelectric dam on the Brahmaputra River in Tibet. Or there they call the river the Yarlung Tsangpo. It's a Tibetan name. So they're planning to build a dam that is going to produce 3 times as much hydroelectricity as the Three Gorges Dam, which is also a Chinese dam. So that's going to be a gigantic dam. It's going to be on the Brahmaputra. And obviously, it's going to have an effect downstream. Should we open the map? We can, or should we? Okay, let's take a look at the map quickly. Let me remove this from the screen. Let's go to the map. And I'm not quite sure where this dam will be built. It will be built in Tibet, we know that. Now, the Brahmaputra River, as you know, it's a very large river and it flows through Arunachal Pradesh and Assam, and it goes into Bangladesh where it merges with the Ganga, and it's eventually called the Padma River. So this is the Brahmaputra. This is the coming river. Where is the Brahmaputra and where does it come from, and so on, so on, so forth. I think so. One thing we have to remember, maybe this is the Brahmaputra, is it? Yeah, this is the Brahmaputra. So it comes from Tibet. In Tibet, it's a reasonably small river, but it becomes gigantic in India. So the first thing we have to understand is that about 80% of the Brahmaputra's water comes from within India. Most of it comes from the rainfall that happens in the lush forests of Arunachal Pradesh. So about 80% of the water of the Brahmaputra comes from within India itself. So even if the Chinese cut off, let's say hypothetically, the flow of water of the Brahmaputra, it will impact only 20% of the flow. 80% will still continue as it is. So from that perspective, we don't need to worry as much, worry that much. Now, secondly, another danger is that if the Chinese have dammed the river and then they suddenly release a large quantity of water from the dam, then what can happen? It can definitely flood the downstream areas. And as we know, Assam sees flooding every single year. Very extensive flooding happens every year in the rainy season because of the flooding of the Brahmaputra. The Brahmaputra is prone to flooding in the monsoons, in the rainy season. So this, if the Chinese at the same time that flooding is happening, if they release a large quantity of water, that can certainly worsen the situation. So these are the issues that we are facing and we will face once the Chinese build this dam. Now, the Chinese have in the past held India hostage to such water issues. I remember in the early 2000s, there was this buildup of an artificial lake in Tibet uh, on a river called the Parichu or something. And there was the possibility that this artificial or natural dam, was it? I don't know. This dam would burst and it would flood very large parts of India and cause all kinds of damage. So this is something that Chinese have done for a long time. And if they build a dam on the river Brahmaputra in Tibet, it can certainly hold India hostage in this manner. So, what are the Chinese up to? Is the question. Why are they doing this? First of all, we have to understand they have the right to build any dam they want on their territory. They have no agreement with India or any other nation about what kind of water usage rights each country has and so on. There's no agreement of any kind. So they are well within the rights to build dams on territory they control. Right? Um, Now, what has been the Chinese response to these concerns? Let's find out. Right? So there is this article that let's put on the screen and let's read it briefly. China defense plan to build world's largest dam on the Brahmaputra River in Tibet. The $137 billion project is being constructed in the ecologically fragile Himalayan region. Their foreign ministry spokesperson downplayed apprehensions on the country's plan to build the world's largest dam. She said that the mega project will not affect riparian states and its safety concerns have been addressed through decades of studies. So she's essentially the Chinese are essentially saying, trust us, trust what we are saying. There will be no effect. There will be no impact. That's not how the world works, right? So the $137 billion project is being constructed in the ecologically fragile Himalayan region located along a tectonic plate boundary that can cause earthquakes. The region is tectonically unstable. We know that. And she said that the world's largest dam will not impact low-lying areas. She said China has always been responsible, blah, 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 for the development of cross-border rivers. And the hydropower development in Tibet has been studied in an in-depth way for decades. And safeguard measures have been taken for the security of the project and ecological and environmental protection. Yeah. So again, trust me, bro, is what they are saying. She added the project will not affect lower reaches. China will continue to maintain communication with countries in the lower reaches through existing channels and set up cooperation on disaster prevention and relief. The construction of the dam has been approved. It's going to be the planet's biggest infrastructure project in Tibet, close to the Indian border. It's going to be built at a huge gorge in the Himalayan reaches where the Brahmaputra River makes a huge U-turn to flow into Arunachal Pradesh and then eventually into Bangladesh. Uh, it will take at least a decade to build. It will require connecting to the grid further east as there's zero need, etc. Massive engineering undertaking. Everyone downstream is going to be concerned about what it means if water flow is reduced. and India is very anxious about it. So the Chinese are saying, trust us, we will not do you any harm. Uh, we are very trustworthy, reliable, and we are very consistent with what we do, and so on. So that's the situation. It's going to happen somewhere north of Arunachal Pradesh, close to the India border, and that's the deal. So the question is, what are the Chinese doing? Uh, as you can see, Vikramaditya Rathore is saying that it looked like India and China were going in the right track, and China was making the right moves towards de-escalating the tensions with India, but now they are doing this. So yeah, that's how it goes. Okay, there's nothing you can do about it. The Chinese are well within the rights to do what they're doing. I'm not saying it's the right thing to do. It of course is going to affect everybody else. It's going to give China a huge amount of leverage on India and the downstream nations like Bangladesh. And yeah, so that's what happens when another nation controls the heights, the high regions north of you, the downstream, the upstream regions. So it's a lesson that we should learn. I think in the centuries to come, future Indian geopolitical strategists should understand that because of the mistakes we made in the 20th century, we are now suffering from the consequences. And we are kind of in a position where we are, to be very frank, kind of helpless against what the Chinese can do. In the future, borders will change. So, future geopolitical strategists, future leaders of India, future emperors of India should take note of the mistakes the previous generations have made. So, right now, there's nothing we can do about it. What we can do is, yeah, so there's a chance of earthquakes increasing. And what India can do is, India can build multiple dams on the Brahmaputra in the Arunachal Pradesh Assam region that can, cumulatively taken together, prevent any sudden rush of water from causing too much damage. That's going to be an engineering challenge, but I'm sure it can be looked at, and probably the problem can be solved. So that's one thing India could do to mitigate such an eventuality. Okay, this is big news. Hedgehog's dilemma, Pranay Paul and Sangeeta. There is an attack on Indians and Hindu Americans online on the topic of H1B visas. Will this affect Trump's policy towards India and immigration from India? Pranay says, amid discrimination against Indian Hindus, figures like Elon Musk defend H1B visas, prioritizing talent over nationalism. Does the US agenda genuinely care for poor white natives, or is it solely about global talent and power? Are oligarchs like Musk more about power than loyalty to any land? Is this uniquely American or a global trend? What are your thoughts on racism on X, especially after Elon Musk backed the H1B program? Why target only Indians? Is it because we are not united, unlike other races? And Indians are among the most law abiding? Why isn't the Indian government doing more to address brain drain and improve domestic conditions? It's painful to watch. So, yes, the H1B visa has become a hot issue of very heated debate. And what we are seeing is this. Look, Trump came to power on a number of promises. One of these promises was to end illegal immigration. And Trump's voters are the conservatives, the right wingers, the MAGA section of the US population, make America great again. So they're the conservatives, they're the white Christians, mainly white people. Lots of non-whites have also voted for Trump, no doubt about that. But the main voter base is the white Christians, the conservative section of the society, population. And they are making a huge deal of the H1B visa. They're saying that it takes away jobs from white Americans, from American natives. Well, natives is the wrong word to use when it comes to white Americans, but okay, American citizens. And they say that H1B visa, the H1B visa scheme, it takes away jobs from the citizens and gives them to Indians. They are focusing on Indians. Lots of Chinese come on H1B visas, but that's not being spoken about. Now it's interesting that the annual limit on the H1B visa in the US is 65,000. and an additional 20,000 visas are given to people who fulfill certain criteria. You need to have a master's degree or a higher degree from a US educational institution. So for those, there's an additional 20,000, a cap of 20,000 people. So it's 65 plus 20, it's 85. So every year there is this quota. About 85,000 people can get an H1B visa. And not all are Indians, maybe not even half are Indians. So how many Indians are actually coming in? Maybe 20, 30,000, maybe at most 40,000. And these are highly skilled people, highly qualified people who come and they work for the US and build the US. And that's how the nation has been built. The US has consistently had this policy of draining the world of its talent. And it helps the US and destroys the other countries, right? Where the best talent is immigrating from. So that's the policy they've always had. But now these conservatives, they are going after the Indians. They are not seeing the fact that the Biden administration brought in millions of low quality, low skilled, illegal immigrants into the country. Instead of outraging about that, they are trying to pin the blame of immigration on Indians. So there is definitely a racism angle in this. Indians, unlike the Chinese, Indians are definitely not united as a single voting bloc. So that's why even the political parties don't really care, because Indians are very individualistic minded, very democratic minded, and Indians will vote about issues. They don't unite politically. So if in Canada, for example, the Khalistanis, who are Canadian citizens, they are all united as a single voting bloc. You do something against them, then they will all vote against you in the next election. It's guaranteed. They vote as a bloc. In the US, Indians, Hindus especially, they don't vote as a bloc. They are always divided, and that's why they don't really matter as a voting bloc. So it's easy. They are an easy punching bag. They are an easy scapegoat when it comes to various situations. The fact is that they are contributing talent to India, to the US. They are building the US. They, as we know, it's the old cliche, right? Most of the Fortune 500 CEOs, not most, but many of the Fortune 500 CEOs are Indian origin people. When it comes to whether it's Microsoft, Satya Nadella, whether it is Alphabet, Google, Sundar Pichai, and whoever else. So many Indians are in charge of these companies, and they are helping the US cause, right? They are working for their adopted country. About 20 or 30% of NASA employees are said to be Indians, and so on. So Indians contribute a lot to the US, but they are the easiest target, the easiest scapegoat. And the H1B visa issue is a very small issue, just 65,000 or 85,000, whichever way you want to look at it, per year. It's no big deal. And these are high quality legal immigrants, not illegal immigrants. So why aren't they outraging about the illegals who have been flowing into the US? No outrage about that. Now Elon Musk has supported the H1B visa program, as he would, because he himself is an immigrant. He himself was born somewhere else. He became a naturalized US citizen. Vivek Ramaswamy has spoken about this, and he seems to have taken quite a beating online from the MAGA crowd. So yeah, there's all this happening right now. So does the US agenda really care for poor white natives, or is it solely about global talent and power? It's all about global talent and power. The US government will always prioritize draining other countries of talent. So that's going to continue. Will all this affect Trump's policy towards India and immigration from India? You know what? It possibly could, because at the end of the day, he has to do what his voters prefer. So it could perhaps have some kind of impact on Trump's policies once he comes into office. Elon Musk has definitely supported this thing, and he also, along with Vivek Ramaswamy, has taken quite a beating. It all started when Trump appointed somebody as in the role of the AI advisor to his government, and this was Sriram Krishnan, I think, an Indian origin American. So that's the appointment that triggered everything off. So yeah, Indians are most law abiding. Indians are the best qualified, the highest earning ethnic group in the US, and so on. But yeah, easy targets. What should India do? We are being drained of our best talent every year. What should India do about this? We can fix a lot of things. We have to fix the education system. We have to fix the country and make it meritocratic. We should respect merit instead of giving reservations to people who don't deserve it. People who deserve reservations deserve it only if they are economically and financially vulnerable. But that's not being done, and ease of doing business needs to improve. So I'm sure the government is working on these things, but it will take time. Hopefully it should take less time, and India should become the kind of country that is attractive not just to its own citizens but to outsiders. That's the kind of country India needs to become in order to be able to prevent and hopefully even reverse the brain drain. So yeah, work in progress. Hopefully, work in progress. Hopefully, one sees signs and symptoms of something being done about that. Still early days. Okay, Yajnavalkya says the US model of immigration seems to attract most of the elites of many countries, including our top rankers, India, let's say in the JEE. Yeah. How should we counter this, since this seems to give the US a permanent advantage? If we open ourselves to this sort of immigration, we would encounter demographic change the US seems to be encountering in its territory over the past 70 years. What's the solution? And is such an immigration model sustainable? In the US, will all immigrants assimilate? Interesting question. I kind of touched upon this in the previous question, but what's assimilation, first of all? Assimilation means you give up your culture. Essentially, assimilation means you give up your culture and you adopt the culture of your adopted nation. So if an Indian immigrant goes to, let's say, France, what does it mean? What does it mean for this person to assimilate? Let's say an Indian family moves to France. What does it mean to say that this family has assimilated into French society? It means they speak French, hopefully French at home. Uh, they practice French culture. They support the French football team, and so on and so forth. You become fully French. You give up your culture and you adopt your adopted country's culture. That is assimilation. Uh, Now you don't need to completely assimilate in multicultural pluralistic nations like the EU nations, in the Western nations. It's okay to practice your own religion, to speak your own language, but you should also at the same time speak the local language as well, hopefully, as the natives. And you should work towards acquiring that sort of fluency in the language. So there are certain things you can do to assimilate, and certain things you don't really need to do. In the US, do all immigrants assimilate? Not all assimilate, but definitely the second generation immigrants assimilate, which means the descendants of the actual people who came into the country from another country. Their children definitely are much more assimilated than the parents. So that's how it goes. So now the US model of immigration is a model of brain drain. You suck out the best talent from all countries, especially large nations like India and China. Attract the best talent. Now, when it comes to China, the Chinese have a very clear policy that they are okay with Chinese students going and studying in the US, but they have made China increasingly attractive for not just Chinese, but for the rest of the world. And that's why most Chinese students, they eventually go back to China. Or let's say they found companies in the US and they create startups or companies or whatever, but their allegiance to China doesn't go away. The Chinese typically have ways and means of staying in contact with Chinese citizens who settle abroad. So very few of these become US citizens. In the past, lots of them did become US citizens, but now the trend seems to be on a downward curve of Chinese students becoming US citizens, acquiring US citizenship. And even if they acquire US citizenships, they don't quite lose their ties with China and allegiance to China. The US is very, very aware of this phenomenon. When it comes to India, there's no such thing. The moment you're out of India, you want to become a citizen of that other country because there's nothing waiting for you back in India. That's historically been the situation. And even now, India is not, in my opinion, doing enough to make coming back to India an attractive enough option for Indian students who go abroad. Long way to go for that. So the US takes advantage of this. There's this nation with tremendously gifted people, brilliant students. The cream of the population is brilliant. I'm not saying the whole population is geniuses, but India produces per capita more geniuses than other countries, other civilizations, other cultures. So the US taps into that. The US is very attractive, and that's why they're able to drain India. And obviously, it gives a permanent advantage to the US, right? To the US. So what's the solution? The solution is to make India a top class country. Right now, we are classified as a third world country, not unjustly. There are other terms used for countries like India. I'll not go into that. But we need to raise our standards as a nation. There are countries that are poorer than India with lower per capita GDPs that have better standards of living. It has a lot to do with the corruption that is rampant allegedly in India, right? So the government, what India needs to do is that the government, central government, whoever needs to launch a war on corruption. But that would mean that is problematic for politicians because of the nature of politics in India. Launching a war on corruption is problematic for even the tallest leaders, because of the ground realities of politics in India. But it has to be done. So if you address the issue of corruption, India will become a much better country to live in. All the infrastructure issues will quickly get resolved or go into the process of being resolved. And the quality of life, standards of living will significantly increase. Then we need to make India a meritocratic country. No more reservations, or if you want to give reservations only to those who are financially and economically vulnerable. And reservations mean, what kind of reservations should be given? Free education, not free jobs, not preference in jobs. Once you get your free education, then you need to be in the job market just like everybody else without any special preference. So that needs to happen, but that is nowhere near happening in India. And that's why people who are from the general category, they want to leave India. Students, children, kids, youngsters. Why would they stay in a country where somebody who gets way less marks than you will be given a job, but you won't get it? Why would you live there? They will rightfully feel that the country doesn't care about them, so they leave. So these issues need to be addressed. The education system needs to be reformed. The ease of doing business needs to be reformed. India needs to become a manufacturing hub, a big, much larger economic power. And if you do these things, then there'll automatically be more job creation. There'll be a huge demand for talent. India needs to become an R&D intensive nation. Then you will attract the best R&D talent, the best researchers, the best engineers. All of these things need to happen. We are far away from that happening. And so that's what I can say. That's what needs to happen. Is it happening? Not quite right now. Okay, Pranay Paul and Vikramaditya Rathore. Why did Putin apologize to Azerbaijan's President Aliyev over the AZAL plane incident in Russian airspace, despite the external interference reportedly caused by Ukrainian drone attacks? Was this apology a gesture of diplomacy, an acknowledgement of Russia's air defense response, or part of a broader strategic relations between Russia and Azerbaijan? What's the reason behind the crash of the Azerbaijani flight in Kazakhstan? As per Azerbaijani probe, they are blaming Russia for this. Can you explain who is the perpetrator behind this? As I find hard to believe that Russia would be involved, considering they have reasonably good ties with Azerbaijan and Russia has strong influence there, as it was a former Soviet republic. Okay, so a few days ago, this past week, a plane crashed in Kazakhstan. Shall we go to the map? Let's go to the map and find what happened. Where's the map? Let's put that on the map briefly. So where did this happen? It happened. So the aircraft took off. Not sure where it took off from. Maybe from Baku, and it was going somewhere in Russia, maybe Grozny or somewhere. I don't remember quite where, but it was supposed to go to its destination, and then it made a detour and went to Aktau in Kazakhstan. and there's an airport outside of Aktau where this aircraft sadly crash landed. It was not able to land on the runway, it crashed near the runway, and yeah, that's what happened. Now, if you look at the video and images, if you look at the video and if you look at the images of this crashed plane, and you will see that on the fuselage, on near the tail section, around the tail section, there are lots of holes, and those holes are caused by shrapnel. Shrapnel is fragments of metal that come out of an exploding bomb or device. So clearly, this aircraft took a missile strike. It was struck by a missile, an anti-aircraft missile, most likely. And how do these anti-aircraft missiles, many of these anti-aircraft missiles work? Many of these anti-aircraft missiles, they don't go and impact the plane head on. Once they reach a certain distance from the plane, a proximity fuse is activated, and the warhead of the missile detonates close to the plane, but not, it doesn't impact the plane. And when this warhead detonates, it releases a very large quantity of shrapnel, pieces of metal that riddle the plane with holes and severe, and these pieces of shrapnel, they sever the hydraulic lines and whatnot, so it makes the plane impossible to control and operate, or difficult to operate and control. And it basically breaches the cabin, the air pressure drops, and all kinds of terrible things happen. It can breach the fuel tanks and drain the plane of fuel very rapidly or cause a fire. All sorts of catastrophic things can happen. So this plane was hit by a missile. That much is clear. And then it went towards the Kazakhstani city of Aktau, tried to land there. And the video shows the plane struggling to land, making 2 or 3 turns, trying to find a way of landing, but clearly, and one of the survivors said that they heard a loud bang outside the aircraft, and after the bang, the plane started behaving like it was drunk. So it was not under control of the pilots, and eventually it crashed. And unfortunately, several people have died, and thankfully, some people survived as well. Now, that's what happened. That's the context. Now, President Putin has spoken with Azerbaijan's President Aliyev, and he has apologized in the context of this plane crash. Why would Mr. Putin apologize? So he has not taken the blame. He has not admitted that, in so many words, that Russia shot the plane down, but he has apologized. And he said that Russian air defense systems were operational in the area at this time. So the bigger context is that at this time, if you go back to the map once again, at this time in this region, Ukraine, it is being claimed by the Russians that Ukrainian drones were at that time hitting the Russian cities of Vladikavkaz, Grozny, and maybe 1 or 2 more cities. So these are unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, drones, pretty large drones that look like Cessna aircraft and similarly sized, or somewhat smaller in size, and they can drop bombs from the sky, and they are hard to detect, and they don't carry any pilots. And they were in the process of attacking various Russian cities, civilian centers in the region, which is why Russian air defenses were operational. And in comes an aircraft, and the Russian air defenses take it out. So it looks like that's what happened. And that's why it looks like Mr. Putin apologized to President Aliyev of Azerbaijan without explicitly stating that Russia is responsible for this plane crash. So that's what happens in situations, in conflict zones, in war zones, and which is why it makes sense for a civilian aircraft to stay away from this region as far as possible, the Ukraine region and the surrounding region. We also, a few years ago, had a Malaysian Airlines crash in this region, and that too was shot down by a surface-to-air missile. And both sides, Ukraine as well as Russia, have blamed the other for that. We don't quite know who is behind it. The West has blamed Russia for it. Okay, Vikram, geopolitical, and Gaurav ask. Trump says he wants to control the Panama Canal. He wants the control back in the US. He wants to buy Greenland from Denmark. Will he be successful in doing this? Why does Trump want to make literally every other North American nation as part of the US? Uh, Trump wants to annex Canada. He calls Canada the 51st state of the US. He calls Justin Trudeau the governor of the great state of Canada. He has now sent a proposal to Denmark for Greenland, and he plans to take over Panama, the Panama Canal. What is Mr. Trump thinking? See, Mr. Trump is a businessman, first and foremost. His entire life, he has been a businessman, and he sees the world in business terms. So I think he wants to make some acquisitions for his company, for the United States. And so what will the US gain, let's say, by acquiring Greenland, by acquiring a control of the Panama Canal, by taking over Canada? Will it be a headache or a net positive, net benefit for the US? It depends. Taking control of the Panama Canal is obviously it's one of the most important strategic choke points in the world. In case you don't know where that is, the Panama Canal. Let's dive deep into it very quickly. It's this canal that connects the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. Okay, this is where it exists, and it's a pretty narrow canal. And before this canal was built, if you were in a ship and you want to travel from the Atlantic to the Pacific or vice versa, you had to go all the way down south, and you had to navigate across Cape Horn, which is one of the most dreaded passages in the world. This is Parque Nacional Cabo de Hornos, National Park, Cape Horn. Extremely rough seas over here, extremely stormy weather, and very, very perilous voyages if you want to navigate the Cape of Horn. So the Panama Canal has made life so much easier, and a tremendous amount of shipping transits through that. So if the US takes control of it, look, Panama is an American nation, as in it is part of the Americas. It's in Central America, and every nation in the Americas is, what's the V word? The vassal word, right? It's a vassal of the US. They are all controlled explicitly or not by the US, and they will not do anything that goes against the interests of the US. And that's something the Americans have striven to establish for a very long time, and they've established it long ago, more than a century ago, the Monroe Doctrine. So, so as it is, the Panama Canal is kind of under US control indirectly, but let's say the Americans take control of it, then they will get more direct control of it. When it comes to Canada, the US spends a lot of money every year sustaining Canada and giving all kinds of aid and so on, looking after Canada's territorial defense and whatnot. So if the US takes Canada over, I think it will be a net benefit for both nations. The Canadians will get a better government, a better system. Maybe will they become the 51st state, or will like a whole bunch of new states be added? That depends, and that remains to be seen. But the Canadians will get a better government, a more effective, efficient government. And the US will get a much larger territory. I think it could be a win-win for the US and Canada, for the people of Canada and the US. Greenland is rich in resources, natural resources, so makes sense for the US to acquire that. And if they really, really want to acquire it, there's nothing Denmark can do to stop the Americans. So President Trump is thinking in terms of acquisitions. He's thinking in terms of national interest. The only question is this going to be a net positive or negative? I think overall it could be a net positive. Obviously, the US bureaucracy and military will have to expand and take over these places and control these places, and set up the systems of governance and all that. It will take some time. It's going to cost some money, not small amounts of money, but certainly can be done. The Americans know how to do it. So that's what is going on. It'll be an interesting 4 years when Mr. Trump is in power. Mr. 88ers says, how can you call India one of the 4 genuine sovereign nations aside from Russia, China, and the US, when the matter of fact is that our nation is still continuing the British Constitution? The judiciary system is from the British times. We see our culture and people getting absorbed by the Western propagandists at will. And then we have our PM visiting Ukraine from external pressure. Is having an independent foreign policy the only factor that should count towards being called a genuinely sovereign nation? Okay, good question. Very good question. I was recently in Hong Kong a couple of weeks or so ago, Um, it was kind of a diplomatic visit, so to say. And I had a conversation with a Chinese professor of law, a conversation over coffee in a cafe. We spoke for about an hour, and I wanted to understand the Chinese legal system. And the professor told me that the Chinese legal system, it's got two sets of laws. One is for the criminal justice, and one is for the civilian justice, let's say. And the Chinese legal system, the Chinese legal code, is kind of copy pasted from various European codes. Okay, so it's not just India that has British laws. Most countries have European and Western laws, even the Chinese. Okay, so the judicial system is very much, and if you go to Macau, etc., the judicial system is in Portuguese. Macau is a part of China. In Hong Kong, they have a separate judicial system compared to China, and so on. So even in China, you have the situation. Okay, um, the constitution, the Chinese constitution, I'm not sure. I've not looked at it. I am not sure where it is taken from. Is it a purely, entirely Chinese civilizational constitution, or is it also inspired by various Western constitutions? I'm not sure. But in India, I agree. The Indian constitution is a copy paste job of various Western constitutions. The judicial system is entirely rooted in European jurisprudence. There are no Indian values, or there's no Indian civilizational touch in the Indian judicial system, the legal system, the laws, all of that, the corpus of laws that we have, the penal codes and civil codes and all that, um, and so on. Now, why do I say that India is a genuinely sovereign nation? It's not just about the independent foreign policy. Overall, the Indian government and the Indian system, it is aligned with the Indian national interest, not the Indian civilizational interest, but the Indian national interest. And there is little or less foreign interference in this balance. You can never have zero foreign interference, even in the US, even if you're American. But overall, we are no one's vassal. So number one, we have the entire system is geared toward the Indian national interest, whether it is the government, whether it is the military, important, whether it is the kind of laws you can pass, and so on. Let me contrast that with, let's say, Germany or France or Italy. What does it mean for a nation to be sovereign? It means that your democratically elected or undemocratically elected, whatever, your leadership should be able to pass its own laws, right? Secondly, it should be able, your nation should be able to control its own currency and its own economy. Yes, in the EU, nations can't even pass their own laws. Their laws are essentially nothing but rehashes of the laws that are passed in Brussels, the headquarters of the European Union. France or Germany or Italy or Spain or whoever, they aren't in a position to pass laws that are contradictory to what Brussels passes. Do you call that sovereignty? No, it is not sovereignty. You are not a sovereign nation anymore. Secondly, the currency in the European Union is the euro. The euro is essentially a rebranded Deutschmark. Okay, so France had this great currency, the franc, gone, wiped out. The Spanish had the peseta, the peso. What did they have? Probably the peso, gone, wiped out. Italy had the lira, gone, wiped out. These countries cannot even control their own economy. They cannot even control a currency that they own. Zero sovereignty, right? So in the EU, you have pooled sovereignty. The real power lies in Brussels. All the decision making happens in Brussels, and these nations are completely helpless. Then they can't even control their own borders. You have to allow in immigrants. The whole EU, the Schengen zone, is open to all citizens. So you can't say, okay, people from so and so EU nation cannot come into my country because they're troublemakers. You can't say that anymore. You can't control your borders, you can't control your currency, you can't control your economy, you can't even pass your own laws. And if you happen to be a member of NATO, even you don't even control your own military. That is called lack of sovereignty. India has its own currency. India controls its own economy. India controls its own borders. There are problems, but overall we still control our borders. So we have our own currency. We control our the entire economic activity. We pass our own laws. We control our borders. We can decide who comes and who doesn't come in, and we don't have any foreign military presence on Indian territory. So if you put all of these things together, despite having imperfections, India is a genuinely sovereign country. And there are only 4 such nations in the world: the US, India, Russia, and China. No other nation is fully sovereign. Okay, there are other countries. You will give me examples. Okay, so and so country has its own currency. So and so country controls its own borders, and so on. But these countries, they will be compromised in other ways. Their foreign policy will be an extension of, let's say, the US foreign policy. Let's say Japan. Japan has its own currency, the yen, which means that they control their currency, they control their economy. Let's say, okay, they pass their own laws. They have elections. They pass their own laws. All of that. They control their borders. But then there's the question of the US occupation of Japan. More than 130 permanent US military bases on Japanese soil. And the Japanese government cannot take any big decisions when it comes to military policy or security policy or external policy or economy without the approval of the US generals, and so on. So there are so many examples that you can give, but I can always give you counterpoints. So there are only 4 genuinely sovereign nations: the US, Russia, China, and India. It's not only about the independent foreign policy. There's a whole lot more that goes into this. Hopefully this makes sense. Okay, Sarthak says, what are your views on India sending rice to Bangladesh even after so much hatred towards India? Yeah, India is selling rice to Bangladesh. Look, the Russians sell high quality rocket engines to the Americans. The RD something, I forget the rocket engine's name, but the Americans have been trying to replicate those reverse engineer those rocket engines. It's not working. So the Russians are selling rocket engines to the Americans even now. I think soon they'll stop selling them. Some kind of announcement was made. When the Americans want to go to the International Space Station, they go on a Russian rocket, the Soyuz rocket from Baikonur in Kazakhstan. The Russians have been selling all kinds of stuff to the Americans. These 2 nations are essentially at war, but they're still engaging in trade. They're being pragmatic. They're being realistic. You can trade with your enemies. You can trade with those who hate you, as long as it's mutually beneficial, as long as it benefits us. So when it comes to India and Bangladesh, yeah, we know that unfortunately, sadly, tragically, most Bangladeshis or many Bangladeshis seem to hate India. It's not their fault. First, understand that. The hatred has a couple of factors or reasons. One is the religious angle. The Bangladeshis seem to love Pakistan over India, despite what the Pakistanis did to their ancestors in 1971. We'll not go into those horrible atrocities. Despite what the Pakistanis did to them, many Bangladeshis love Pakistan and hate India. You can't explain that without looking into the religious angle. Common religion, right? Is it their fault that they are born into so and so religion or whatever? It's not their fault. It's the consequences of what happened in history the past 3-4 centuries, right? There is that. And then there's the education system in Bangladesh, which teaches them that Bangladesh won its independence on its own. The Mukti Bahini fought the Pakistanis and defeated the Pakistanis. And only at the 11th hour, the Indian army came in. The Mukti Bahini was Okay, let's not go into that. We all know what really happened here in India, but that's what the Bangladeshi education system teaches them. It's not their fault they feel this way. And then the political climate is such that everything is blamed on India, the larger neighbor. So that's why they hate India. Many of them. I would not say all, but there are many sensible Bangladeshis too. I'm pretty sure. I'm sure we have a few viewers whom I've interacted with through comments, and so it's not all. But now the fact is that Bangladesh has undergone a coup. Sheikh Hasina has been overthrown. A US-backed puppet regime is in power. Mohammed Yunus is the figurehead, and the army is actually running the show. And Bangladesh's economy is doing very poorly now. It's going to do increasingly more poorly. It's going to go on the same road as Pakistan. Now they want rice. So we are selling them rice. We are not giving it as a donation. We are selling it to them. Not to sell rice to Bangladesh would be childish and petty. Okay? So as long as we are selling rice to Bangladesh at the market rate, everything is fine. As long as we are not giving them rice on a discount, there's no need to give anybody a discount. Everybody should purchase whatever they want at market rate, unless they are on very good terms with us, unless they are a friendly nation. So India and Russia, we are trading in oil, and the Russians have been offering India oil at a discounted rate. That happens when both sides are friends. If Bangladesh wants to be our friend, we can certainly look. After all, we are the same people. We have the same past, the same ancestors. But right now, we are in the situation. So I am okay with this as long as we are selling rice to them at the market rate, at the correct rate. That's fine. Let's not be childish and petty. Okay, we are all grown-ups, aren't we? Hopefully. Vikram Geopolitical says British publisher The Economist has picked Bangladesh as the country of the year. What are my views on this? How big of a joke is it? So when Time magazine puts somebody forth as the person of the year, it's a great honor. Okay, it's one of the greatest achievements an individual can have in their life, to be nominated, to be chosen as Time's person of the year. Now the Economist has picked Bangladesh as the nation of the year, the country of the year. What has typically, to be chosen as a person of the year, you need to be a person of great stature, a person of great substance, and you need to have achieved something very, very massive that year. That's when you are given the title of the person of the year by Time magazine. Similarly, the same set of criteria should apply to the nation of the year, the country of the year, which the Economist seems to judge. So the question is, what great achievement has Bangladesh done this year? Is it a nation of great stature, a great nation of great substance? Unfortunately, it's not, right? We know that. Is its economy doing magnificently? No, it's going in the backward direction. So why have they picked Bangladesh as the country of the year? It's a pat on the back to Mr. Mohammed Yunus, who has in the past been given a Nobel Prize as a pat on the back for his services to the American cause. And so he has been placed as the puppet prime minister or puppet leader of Bangladesh. Sheikh Hasina has been ousted, and just to reintegrate Bangladesh into the community of American vassals, they have given them this nice title of country of the year. I mean, no disrespect to Bangladesh or the Bangladeshi people, but this is just a fact. Okay, so that's why they've done it. Okay, this is a very large question, or maybe a comment. It's by Adrian. I am from the EU, and many things can be said about what I have said about immigration. Your theory that immigration is being used as a tool to make Europe harmless is just a theory. So he's disagreeing with my contention that illegal immigration is being used to reconfigure the demography of Europe and to harm Europe. He disagrees with this. So here's what he says. I can think of many things off the top of my hat. First of all, Europe colonized other parts of the world. That is correct. People from former colonies naturally came to Europe because they were officially part of the country. Okay. No disagreement there. That's why in the Netherlands, there are Hindustani Dutch from the former Dutch colony Suriname. Yes, there are Black Dutch, former slaves, like in the US. There are Indonesian Dutch, and in France you have Algerian origin French people, and Mauritian origin French people, and so much more. Europeans were used to immigration and immigration to and from other parts of the world. No disagreement there. From the 1960s and 70s onwards, people from the Mediterranean countries, including Spain, Greece, and Italy, but also Turkey and Morocco, came to do so-called filthy labor that native Dutch didn't want to do. That's because uh, of the differential that you have in the income levels of both countries. So when you have a high income nation like the Dutch, where you have very good living standards, and you can get a great quality of life even by doing very manual labor or whatever, people would want to go to the country. Why do so many Indians want to go to Canada and become truck drivers or taxi drivers? Because even doing that, you have a better quality of life than you currently have in India. So yeah, what you say makes sense. So people from these poorer European countries like Spain, Greece, Italy, Turkey, Morocco, and so on, they came to do uh, less desirable work that the Dutch citizens didn't want to do. And this is still happening. People from Eastern Europe, like Poland, are doing work that native Dutch aren't doing. Fine. And these workers were simply allowed to stay in the country. All right. They also brought elements of their culture, like nice food. It has all kinds of benefits, like it stimulates openness of mind and tolerance to differences. It reduces racism, xenophobia, all that is fine. Perfectly fine. No question about it. Still happens. And it's wonderful when you have people from wonderful countries and wonderful cultures coming in, and they bring nice food and nice manners and exposure to all the to different cultures. It's great. It's stimulating to have an environment you have where you have so many viewpoints and so many other things. So I don't disagree with you at all. So what's my point? What was my original point? My point was not about legal migration. It was about illegal migration, my friend. Legal migration is fine. You follow the rules and you come through due process, and you come into the country as a legal immigrant, and you are a law-abiding member of society. You respect the local culture, local laws, and you can also maintain to continue to follow your own customs and all that. And you are a law-abiding person. That's a legal immigrant. What's an illegal immigrant? An illegal immigrant is by definition a criminal, a person who enters your country illegally. Okay, by bypassing the due process, the legal process, the correct immigration process. The moment they're in your country, they're a criminal because they've broken the law by coming into your country. And this is being engineered right now in Europe. People are being shipped, boated into Europe across the Mediterranean Sea from various parts of the world. And these are typically young military age men without any women or children with them. And they don't speak the language of the countries. They often don't speak the language of the country they're entering, and they come from a cultural background that is very, very different from your cultural background. They don't respect your culture, and they don't respect your traditions, your culture, your way of life. They want to impose their way of life on you. They are violent. They steal, they break, they attack, they harm in very horrible ways. Is that something that stimulates openness of mind and tolerance of differences? Does that reduce racism and xenophobia? I think it will actually cause more racism and xenophobia in your countries. My issue is, I mean, I don't have a horse in this race. I don't have a dog in this fight. It's not my country I'm talking about. I'm talking about Europe. My point is, if Europe continues this policy of allowing illegal immigrants, military age males from certain cultures, to keep coming into Europe in very large numbers, sooner or later, sooner more than later, you're going to lose your own lands, right? That's my point. McLovin says, how does deportation work? What if East Pakistan refuses to take back their citizens? Deportation. What is deportation? Deportation is when a country forcibly sends back a visitor to their home country, whether it's an immigrant or a tourist or somebody who has come for business or whatever. But if that person is forcibly compelled to leave the country, that is called deportation. So deportation can be done at the offender's own expense, or if the offender is not able to pay for it, then the host country will put that person on a flight, pay for the flight, and and have the person leave the country. That's called deportation. You are expelled because you are undesirable, because you must have committed some crime or something. That's generally why you are deported. So that's deportation. Now, McLevin asks, what if East Pakistan refuses to take back their citizens? So the issue he's referring to is that of the illegal Bangladeshi immigrants who have settled in India, maybe 100 million, at least 50 million, probably 100 million. That's a huge issue for India. Huge national security issue, huge demographic issue, huge issue of every single kind of that we're facing in India. And one is assuming that when Trump starts deporting the illegal immigrants who Biden brought in, that would give India a great opportunity to expel and deport all the illegal Bangladeshis out of India. For that to happen, you would have to first identify them, all of them, and put them in certain containment camps before they are deported, right? Remove them from the general population because they're criminals. They've come into India illegally, and they're illegally holding fake fraudulent Indian documents, which they've obtained illegally, right? That's what happens when you're an illegal immigrant who is squatting on Indian territory. So that process will have to happen before we can deport anyone. We have to first identify each and every one of them, maybe 50, 100 million. That's a very large number, which means this identification exercise is going to be a very large exercise. Then you have to physically remove them from the general population so that they cannot do any more harm. And you have to put them in specially designated places for as little time as possible. And then you can deport them through whatever means to their home country, by train, by bus, by plane, whatever. Yeah. Maybe we can use military planes or whatever. That government can figure it out. I'm not sure this process has started yet, but let's say we start the process and we have decided to deport the Bangladeshis. What happens if East Pakistan, which is Bangladesh, refuses to take back their citizens? Yeah, so in that case, India has to ensure that whether they refuse or not, they would take these people back. And I'm sure we can use various means to compel them to take these people back. These people are not our problem. They are Bangladeshis. They need to go back to Bangladesh. They and their descendants. Obviously, they would have reproduced in India and their children would have been born in India, but that doesn't mean a thing. We don't have jus soli. We have jus or whatever else. We don't have jus sanguine. We have jus sanguinis, not jus soli. So if you're born on Indian territory, it doesn't automatically make you an Indian citizen. Only if your ancestors were Indian, your parents or grandparents or whatever. I'm not sure how it works, but something like that. So if Bangladesh refuses to take back the illegal Bangladeshis from India, that India would have to resort to some kind of force in some way. And that is something we can easily do. So I think that once Trump comes to power and he starts the process of deporting the several million illegals that Biden and Harris brought into the country, that would be a great opportune time for India to deport the Bangladeshis who are squatting on Indian territory. And I think it's an opportunity that Prime Minister Modi should not miss. That's all I can say. Okay, Sanya and Sunil say, the US government has stated that they don't know for sure what these drones, orbs, or plasmoids are, but yet they are not harmful to American citizens. What logic is this? Isn't this a weird statement? An ex-US defense official said, we are not alone about UFO sightings. A while ago, an Israeli space security chief said that aliens exist and Trump knows about it. What's the fact here? Okay, what's the fact here? I don't know. I am not privy to any classified information. I can only make my judgments and my statements based on what's available, what information is available in the public domain. So I don't know what the fact is here. Are aliens really here? Several people seem to be claiming that aliens are here, including very highly placed people, and yet without actual hard evidence, I can't say a thing about that. So I would still say that it's still hearsay. We still don't have any hard evidence. There's no question about the fact that there is hard evidence of these objects in the sky, whether they are orbs or plasmoids or drone-like things or whatever. These UFOs do exist. They're all over the place in the US. But what's funny is this. You want to hear the funny thing? The funny thing is that, see, the past few weeks, these UFOs, UAPs, whatever you want to call them, they have been flying over New Jersey, multiple sightings every night, lots of them at the same time in the sky, like multiple UFOs in the sky at the same time, like 5, 10, 15, 20. They were even caught broadcast live during a news broadcast, not in New Jersey, somewhere else. But yeah, there was this shot of the night sky with the skyline of the city, and in the sky you could see these weird objects moving around. It came live in a news broadcast. So there's no question anymore about the fact that these things exist. Now, the funny thing is this: on December 25, there was probably no UFO activity over New Jersey. It's Christmas Day. So, what does that tell us? Are these aliens Christian, or are these are these objects operated by Christians? It's kind of interesting, right? That on Christmas Day the drones disappeared or the UFOs disappeared. Yeah, so that perhaps gives us a clue as to what the true nature and origin of this phenomenon is. Maybe it's not aliens. Maybe it is secret US military technology that is being deployed for to whatever end. We don't know what the end is, but looks like that. Yajnavalkya says, how does the government deal with moles or spies of foreign powers in its highest positions, like the politburo or in the cabinet? Is it possible to guard against such moles, or is it a matter of luck? Okay, we'll take the first question first. How does the government deal with traitors, moles? A mole is a person who is embedded in your country, in your government apparatus, and who is working towards serving the interests of an enemy nation or another nation. And at the same time, he or she is compromising your national security. That's a mole. It's a spy. It's a traitor. Now ask yourself this very simple question. During the days of the great Chandragupta Maurya and Vishnugupta Chanakya, what was the punishment for high treason? High treason means treason against the nation, against the civilization. Very simple answer. Death penalty. If you betray your nation, the only punishment is death. That's what we had historically. Not just during the time of Chanakya and Vishnugupta and Chandragupta Maurya, but always. Many things can be forgiven. Many transgressions can be forgiven or given lenient punishments. But if you betray your nation, there's only one punishment. Historically, it has always been that. Not just in Bharat, not just in India, it's been the same everywhere. And in the UK, in England, they had even worse punishment than death. It was called hanging, drawing, and quartering. Have you watched the movie Braveheart? Well, the final sequence in Braveheart is an example of somebody being hanged, drawn, and quartered. That's what they did to William Wallace. I have been there. I have been to the Tower of London. I've held the spike on which his head was eventually kept. Anyway, I'm digressing. Historically, the punishment for treason, high treason, has been death. That's what governments historically did. But today we have all kinds of laws and stuff. So I don't know. But now the question is, okay, forget about what punishment you're given. Maybe you give them life imprisonment or whatever. But how can you guard against such moles? Can you guard against traitors? So let's take the example of China. Since around 2010, the Chinese systematically identified every single traitor who was embedded in the Chinese Communist Party and who was working for the United States. And each of these traitors was identified, apprehended, and neutralized, let's say. Every single one of them. And that's how the US lost its hold on China. And that's how China has become a completely sovereign nation. Now, look, spies exist in every nation. Every nation has spies embedded within. And India is not some special case. Indians have this very defeatist mindset that Indian culture and Indian people are the most treasonous people in the world. We have more traitors than anybody else in the world. No, it's not the case. Have you heard of the year of the spy in the US? Okay, I'll not put that on the screen, but Google the year of the spy. And how many spies were exposed in the US in just 1 year? Very high profile spies spying on behalf of the USSR. And the same thing happened in the UK. Lots of American spies were caught in Russia and so on, in the USSR. Spies exist everywhere. There's always a certain percentage of your population that is going to have these anti-national, criminal, and the treasonous tendencies. A small percentage of any population has this. So those are identified by foreign powers, and then they are utilized in this manner. So what do you do to guard against moles? You develop your counter espionage capabilities. During the time of Chandragupta Maurya, Vishnugupta Chanakya, there were spies everywhere. The empire had spies everywhere. I'm not saying you need to become a police state and you need to have spies everywhere. But yeah, if you take your survival seriously, if you take your role as a great nation seriously, you need to have these capabilities, surveillance capabilities, and you need to know who can be compromised, who cannot be compromised. And there are certain signs and symptoms of a person who is more likely to be compromised. And I will not go into that because it is problematic. Um, Look, it's easier to compromise somebody in government, in power, who has children who are living in a foreign country. Just a fact of life. It's easier to compromise somebody who's married to a person of foreign origin, and so on and so forth. So I'm just saying, I'm not pointing fingers at anybody. I'm not naming anybody. I'm just saying, typically, historically, generally, in a theoretical manner, that's how you know who to keep an eye on. And generally, such people should not even be in positions of power. But today, the world is a different place for a certain period of time. It will eventually revert to the old ways, maybe in a different way, but the old ways. Yeah. Okay. Sun Moon says, why is Christmas celebrated all over Bharat when the population is less than 10%? Is this a marketing plan? I think officially the population of Christians in India is less than 2 or 3%. They claim that they are one of the smallest minorities in India. Actually, on the ground, the population may be in excess of 10% because of all the conversions that have been happening on an industrial scale. But they don't advertise it. So officially, technically, the population is less than 2 or 3% in India. And yet we celebrate Christmas all over the year. First of all, it all started by the government declaring Christmas as a holiday and giving everybody a Christmas vacation. This started in 1947, at which time India's population of Christians would have been less than 1%, I'm sure. Right? Why did India have to slavishly follow the Western ways? Why do we have a Christmas vacation in winter? Doesn't make sense. Our summer vacation, the two-month holiday that students get, that should be in winter. And you should have holidays for Diwali and the Indian festivals. But we have a vacation for Christmas, even though no one celebrates Christmas. No one used to celebrate Christmas. And so Christmas obviously is a holiday. And then in the armed forces, you have this great Christmas tradition. Christmas is a great event in the armed forces because India's armed forces have this colonial legacy. And today there's so much marketing around Christmas that everybody in India celebrates Christmas. Happy Christmas, Merry Christmas. Two non-Christians, two Hindus will greet each other. Happy Christmas, Merry Christmas. I mean, I have nothing against Christmas. I have nothing against that religion. It's just not our religion civilizationally. And there are efforts being made right now to demographically re-engineer India. There are massive amounts of funds being poured into conversions of Indians into Christianity. You can see what's happening in Punjab. You can see what's happening in every tribal belt. These people, these individuals, missionaries, they come in on tourist visas and indulge in missionary activity. And now there are all these homegrown missionaries who are doing the same work. This is a national security threat. It's a civilizational threat. I have nothing against any individual voluntarily deciding to become Christian. It's your choice. You live your life. Your choice entirely. But this industrial scale demographic re-engineering project is a national and civilizational security threat. And now, because of the media, the entertainment industry, everybody in India celebrates Christmas. It's becoming slowly bigger than Diwali. Right? The government clamps down on Diwali, cracks on Diwali. You can't burst firecrackers. They're bad for the environment. They scare dogs and birds. So firecrackers are bad. And the Supreme Court goes after that. The government of India goes after the state governments go after Diwali. So Diwali is becoming every year slowly muted down. It's dying. Soon it will be a very quiet, subdued festival. In just a few years, by the end of this decade, it will be almost quiet, silent. But you can do crackers to your heart's content on Christmas and New Year, right? Nobody's going to say a word about that. No government will speak up in that case. The media, the entertainment industry, everybody is doing this. So Christmas is becoming a really big deal. And the problem is, if you say something to youngsters like don't do this, they're gonna want to do it even more. I remember when I was in college, university, and all that. There were these organizations that used to protest against Valentine's Day, and I was of the opinion at the time that why are they doing this? Let people do whatever they want. Mind your business. So today I am older and wiser. That's a foreign import. We don't need that. We have our own way of celebrating love. Uh, but this is what's being done. So this is all a consequence of mental colonization. It's all a consequence of foreign um, the foreign education system that we have, the British colonial education system that still continues today in a different 21st century avatar. It's because of the anti-Hindu policies of the government of India and the various government branches of the government machinery. India is the world's most Hindu-phobic nation, and as a consequence, people are looking at other festivals like Christianity, like Christmas and so on, to celebrate because nobody cracks down on that. And these festivals, like Christmas, are being portrayed as really cool in the media and the entertainment industry. You have MS Dhoni putting our Santa Claus outfit. All the cool people, they do Christmas. So all the kids also want to do it now. And Diwali and Hindu festivals are subtly portrayed as not cool, not cool. You know? So that is what is happening in India. Sun Moon 0877 says, why are birth rates declining all over the world? There are multiple reasons for the decline of birth rates all over the world. The whole world is now following the Western model, the production consumption model, the capitalistic model, in which in which your time you're paid for your time. So most people want a 9 to 8 job or whatever. And in India, when you take a 9 to 8 job, it typically becomes a 9 to 12 job. Not 12. Sorry, 9 to 5, right? 9 to 5 becomes 9 to 8 or 9 to 9. People usually work overtime for the same amount of pay and so on. And because there are not enough high quality jobs in India, once you have a job, you will do whatever it takes to stay to retain that job. So people are overworked more and more. The people are increasingly overworked. Look at the situation in Japan, extreme overwork there. Look at the situation in Korea, South Korea, extreme overwork. And where you have and the cost of living is very high. The cost of raising a child is very high. So most people, because they are so overworked, they're so exhausted, they don't have the time to spend with their spouses. And even if they have some time to spend with the spouse, they simply can't afford to raise children. Or even if they can afford to raise children, they are now living in nuclear families away from their parents and the extended family. So there's no one to take care of the child. So because of these factors, birth rates are plummeting all across the world. Imagine you have a job right next to your house. You work for 8 hours or whatever. You come back home and you have the weekend off, and you have a lot of quality time that you can spend at home with your family, with your spouse, and so on. You're gonna have children. But if you are constantly stressed out, if you're spending 2-3 hours a day traveling, you're working 8-12 hours a day, you're working weekends, and there is this cash crunch and everything is expensive, you're not going to have children. And that's the situation you're seeing all across the world. And then there's the decline of the family system. Not in India thus far. It's going to happen. We're going in that direction. But the decline of the family system worldwide, especially in the West. Most people get divorced in 1 or 2 years, 2-3 years. Most kids live in single parent households, usually single mother households, because the women generally get custody of the child and so on. That also is causing a significant decline in society and so on. So these are the reasons why birth rates are declining all across the world, and that is gonna be a problem long term. Okay, Samrat Singh and Sanya, what's your opinion on Pakistan's recent attack on innocent Afghan children and women? Also, why doesn't India secretly fund militant groups in Pakistan and keep it perpetually occupied with internal issues, allowing us to focus on our growth and development? Taliban has attacked Pakistan. Is an all-out war a possibility between the two countries? And what's the impact on India? Yes, so the Taliban and the Pakistanis are at it again. The Pakistani Air Force, so it all started with with action that the Pakistanis took. The Pakistani military, air force, whatever you want to call it, launched airstrikes on targets in Afghanistan, which ended up killing civilians, women, children, etc. So the Taliban has retaliated, and there's firing and shelling and whatnot happening across the border. This is something that's going to happen over and over again. It's been happening repeatedly in the past, ever since the Taliban took control of Afghanistan. So what's my opinion? It's regrettable that the Pakistanis killed children and women, very bad, but that's Pakistan, right? What can you expect from them? Is an all-out war a possibility between the two nations? No. All-out war is difficult. It can't happen because of the stark power asymmetry between the two nations. Pakistan has a very powerful military compared to what Afghanistan has, and they have a professional military compared to what the Afghan government has, Taliban government has. The Taliban is not a professional military. They were guerrillas. They know how to fight and all, but they don't know how to fight as a professional armed force, which gives them some advantages, but also gives them disadvantages. And of course, the Pakistanis have the kind of equipment the Afghans don't have. They have all kinds of fighter planes, Chinese origin fighter planes, American F-16s. They have missiles of various kinds. They don't even need to use nukes in the case of Afghanistan. That's reserved for India. So there's a huge power asymmetry between Pakistan and Afghanistan, and that's why an all-out war simply can't happen. The Pakistanis can occupy Afghanistan tomorrow if they want. Of course, they will be made to bleed by the Taliban. The Taliban will go back to fighting their old guerrilla tactics, and Pakistan will have a big handful on their hands if they try to invade Afghanistan. But they can do that. So all-out war is not really possible. Yeah. Why doesn't India secretly fund militant groups in Pakistan? Look, we are focusing on our growth and development right now, aren't we? Is Pakistan able to hamper our growth and development in any way today? They can't. Pakistan is not important anymore for India. In the 1980s and 90s and 2000s, Pakistan and India were kind of on par, on the same level. Now India has gone way ahead of Pakistan. There's nothing Pakistan can do, even if it wants, to impede our growth and development. So what we are doing is the right thing. We are ignoring Pakistan and focusing on our growth and development. Why doesn't India secretly fund militant groups in Pakistan and so on? Look, you said the word secret, right? Secretly fund. So let's say, hypothetically, if India is secretly funding these groups, would we advertise it? Would you or me come to know about it? No. These activities, if they are happening, hypothetically, then they are supposed to be secret. So that's why we would not know about it. That's what I would say. Now, the last part is impact on India. Pakistan, Afghanistan fighting again. Impact on India, minimal. Minimal. Okay, Vikram Geopolitical says, I am very much interested in cinema and have good knowledge about it. I want to write and direct films. How difficult is it to break into the industry as an outsider without any connections? Professional filmmaking equipment, courses provided by some colleges are out of my budget. What should I try? What should I study in undergrad for it? I will complete the 12th standard this year. Is it a wise decision to go for filmmaking as a career in India, or should I go for safer options? Please answer me. I'm very confused. I'm glad. It's great to have this ambition, this aspiration to become a filmmaker. You want to write and direct films. That's great. Breaking into the industry in India is very difficult. Bollywood is a closed club. Even extremely talented people who did kind of make it don't really succeed in Bollywood because of the alleged nepotism problem and all that. Now, if you set Bollywood aside and look at other industries, I'm not sure how it works. The various film industries down south, very big film industries, they produce a lot of movies. Some of them are really good as well. Then there is the Bengali film industry, the Tollywood in Kolkata. There are lots of film industries in India. Each would have a different process of getting into it. Now, today, the point is that filmmaking has been democratized by advances in technology. You see, traditionally, if you go back 20 years or even 10 years, filmmaking was a very expensive sport. Let's say sport. Filmmaking was extremely expensive. You needed extremely expensive cameras. You needed to pay all the technicians who would work on the camera. You would need to pay actors. Or if you're making a documentary, you need to gain access to locations, get permissions. You need to carry the equipment in vehicles. Then once you film everything, the film equipment, the film was expensive. the actual film on which everything was stored was expensive. Then after filming, you needed to know how to do the editing was a whole different thing. Once you do the editing and you have your entire film finally made, you needed to release it into theaters, and for that you needed connections and contacts and whatnot. It was such a difficult process. Today you just need a phone to make a film. Movies have been shot on the iPhone, or you can, so an iPhone is an expensive thing, so you can even get a regular phone as long as it shoots HD 1080p. You can make a movie. iPhones can shoot what 4K. So today the investment isn't that much. For you can get a very decent phone camera for maybe a few tens of thousands of rupees, maybe 30, 40, 50,000 rupees. You'll get a very decent uh, phone camera that can capture video at very high quality, maybe even 4K. If you get an iPhone, which is about, I don't know, roughly 1 lakh, depending on whatever the specifications, you can have really cinematic footage. Movies have been shot on iPhones. If you want to spend 2-3 lakhs rupees, then you can buy a Sony FX3 or whatever, A7S3, plus a few lenses. That's going to set you back by maybe 4-5 lakhs. Once you have that, you just need a laptop, high quality laptop, 32 GB RAM, and gaming laptop, and whatever software you want. Some free software is available for editing. Once you have this equipment, you can make any movie you want, right? So you don't need permission today to become a filmmaker, and you don't need to do courses. The best course you can do is to take your camera out there and start filming every day. Start filming every day. Try and emulate the style of your favorite director. If you don't have subjects, that is the actors, try and film in public. In public, if you're in public, filming is and taking photographs is perfectly legal because it's a public space. Try and get cinematic shots and whatnot, and try and tell a story, or try and create a documentary or whatever, or try and make yourself the main focus of your initial movies, right? Vlog style movies. So today you can do anything, and when it comes to distribution and release, initially release it on YouTube. Some of the best directors started as independent directors with very small budgets. One of the greatest directors of all time is Quentin Tarantino. He started as a very small budget filmmaker, but eventually his style was such that he made it big. Today all you have to do is pursue the craft. Don't go and waste money on filmmaking courses. You can get all the education you need of filmmaking by just watching the movies made by the greats: Akira Kurosawa, Fellini, Tarantino, whoever you like. Study those movies. Don't watch them as a consumer just being entertained, but study each scene, each frame, each shot, the composition, the angle, the lighting. Study all of that. Okay, and try and replicate that. And just start. This is the easiest thing in the world. Start with a phone camera and make a movie every day. Make a 5-minute movie every day. Make a 10-minute movie every day. That's the kind of education you need as a filmmaker. Acquire the skills, hone your craft. That's what you need to do. And release it all on YouTube. If you have quality, initially the quality won't be there. But after you make 10, 20, 30, 50, 100 short films like this, the quality will come if you have the talent. It will be visible. And then people will take notice because it's on YouTube. And YouTube is democratic. Anybody can get noticed. And then if the quality is there, you can actually get funding and you can start making high quality, big budget productions. So that's what you do. That's how we do it. All the best, my friend. Don't give up in your dreams. Go get your education, but also pursue this dream of yours. And I wish you all the best. Do well. Okay, this question here by Krishna Raghunath Surinamese. The question is, how long will the internet last and what could possibly replace the internet? That's an interesting question. People generally don't ask this question. So, today, kids who are born today are born into a world where the internet is always on. High quality internet, streaming. It's always on. The moment these kids are born, by the age of 6 to 8 months, they start using their iPads and whatnot, and they can navigate these operating systems brilliantly the way older people can't. And they have been born into this world of the internet. So if you are a youngster, you kind of would imagine that the internet will last forever. You take it for granted. It's always there. It's always been there. But if you just go back a couple of decades, maybe 30 years, you go back to the early 90s or mid 90s, there was no internet anywhere. I think internet started appearing in India in the second half of the 1990s, and in the US in the first half of the 1990s. But it was still an absolute rarity. Before that, there was no internet to speak of. Now, what is the internet is the question. The internet essentially is a whole bunch of computers that are connected to each other and that communicate in real time at the speed of light, more or less the speed of light. And there are servers and server farms and cloud storage servers and all that, which host a whole bunch of data, and they serve these pages and all that to the end user. And we interact with these servers, and that's how the internet happens. There's a tremendous amount of data today stored across the world. So what would it take to take out the internet? First of all, if there is a solar flare, if there's a magnetic storm that fries the Earth's circuits, it'll wipe out the internet instantaneously. So, and that's something that's going to happen. A solar storm, a geomagnetic storm like the Carrington event, it's going to happen. Maybe next year, maybe next decade, maybe next century, but it's going to happen. Do we have defenses against that? I'm not quite sure about that. So that could take out the internet. All this stuff that we create, it may not last forever. It may be wiped out. And then if you so one of the pillars that the internet depends on is the servers. And the second pillar the internet depends on is the connections between these servers. And these connections are through submarine cables. So if you see this map, or the submarine cable map, these are the cables that actually pipe the internet to various parts of the world. And these are typically trans-Pacific, trans-Atlantic, trans-Indian Ocean, etc. cables. So for example, if you look in the Indian Ocean region, you have all these cables. It's not a whole lot of cables. And if something happens to these cables, entire countries can lose access to the internet. So this is more about connectivity, but when it comes to the storage of data and the storage of web pages, it's all about the servers that the data is stored on. If something happens to the servers, the data disappears forever in case there are no backups. So the internet is a fragile thing. It depends on this new set of technologies that we have developed over the past few decades, and it may not last forever. What could possibly replace the internet? Maybe the Stone Age. I don't know. No, the internet, if it doesn't get destroyed, it's gonna get iteratively more and more complex, and eventually. See, right now we have a lot of video on the internet. Initially, it was just text and pages. Then you had images, digital images. Then you had video. Now you have high quality video, 4K video, 8K video, live streaming video, and all that. Eventually, you may have virtual reality stuff and three-dimensional images and whatnot stored in the internet. Eventually, it may become holographic. You can only speculate. So that could be the future of the internet. It will not be replaced. It will just go on becoming better and better and more complicated with more and more capabilities. Okay, a lot more questions are there, but I won't be able to take them today. Let me take some questions from the live chat. And here's a question by Amisha. Was Mars once like Earth? So if you look at Mars, it's smaller than our planet. But it's like a smaller version of Earth. The gravity is, I don't know, is it a quarter of what we have here? Definitely significantly less than what we experience on Earth here. But Mars is the only planet apart from Earth and Venus that exists in the so-called Goldilocks zone around the sun, which is the zone where water can exist in liquid form. It is close enough to the sun that water can exist in liquid form. Right now, there's almost no water on the surface of Mars except at the polar regions where you have these polar ice caps. But there seems to be a lot of water under the soil under the surface of Mars. And if you look at the topography of Mars, you will find a lot of drainage channels, a lot of canyons, and so on, which give you evidence of water activity on the planet in the past. So, about a billion years before today, there was water on Mars. There was a large quantity of liquid flowing water on Mars. There were oceans, there were lakes, there were rivers, there were floods, there were canyons, all that stuff caused by water. So, Mars was once warm, it had a much thicker atmosphere, and it had a very large quantity of flowing water. It may even have had possibly life, even though we don't have actual evidence of it, hard evidence, but definitely a possibility. So, yes, Mars was once much more like Earth than what it is today. Today, it is a frigid, desolate planet with a thin atmosphere, and whatever water exists there is solid. It's ice. In the past, it was warm, just like Earth. It had water bodies just like what we have today. Okay, let's see, what other questions do we have? Uma Maheshwari says, if we achieve light speed, can we travel through time? Okay. See, light speed can't be achieved. The laws of physics forbid it. Just look at the very basic equations of special relativity. And yeah, you have time dilation for sure, which tells you that if something is traveling at the speed of light, it won't experience time. So, but you also have other relativistic effects. One of the effects is that your mass increases with velocity. The faster you go, the more massive the object becomes. So let's say you have a proton that's traveling at 0.999 times the speed of light. Its mass is going to be much more than a proton sitting in a rest frame compared to you and me, the observer. So if a proton were to actually try and achieve light speed, it would have to gain infinite mass. And infinite mass doesn't exist in the universe, right? So achieving light speed is just simply impossible. But it is theoretically possible to travel very large distances faster than the speed of light if you kind of cheat. Not really cheating, if you use an Einstein-Rosen bridge, a wormhole, which kind of is a shortcut through space and time. But wormholes are theoretical, and we don't know if it's possible to make them. But yes, if you can traverse a wormhole, a traversable wormhole, and certain conditions are fulfilled, then time travel could actually end up happening. But you can't achieve light speed traditionally or conventionally without using a wormhole. It's not possible. And even if you're traversing a wormhole, you're actually traversing it at less than the speed of light. But you can reach places in the universe that are much further away than you can travel at the speed of light at the same amount of time. So you may actually be able to travel superluminally if you can use a wormhole. The end result is a superluminal travel. And then depending on the velocity of the two mouths of the wormhole compared to each other, you may actually end up traveling through time. So theoretically, some things are possible. Theoretically, using wormholes, time travel seems to be possible, but not otherwise. Yeah, so relativistic mechanics is an interesting branch of physics. Relativity itself. Okay. Matrix says, how do animals like dogs and birds communicate within their species? Do they understand signals or languages from other species too? Whales. Let's take the example of whales. Whales are these gigantic animals that live in the oceans. They are animals, they're mammals, they breathe, they have lungs, they don't have gills like fish. So they have whale songs. And they have lots of different vocalizations. And they have, essentially, it's a language. And they use these vocalizations to communicate with each other at very large distances of more than hundreds or even thousands of kilometers, because sound travels very large distances in water, in the oceans. So whales communicate through vocalizations. There is also body language communication. So the same goes for dolphins, which also belong to a closely related group of animals. So they communicate through vocalization and body language. Birds have bird songs, and each bird song is taught by the parents to the children somehow. And every species has a certain set of vocalizations. So the vocalizations that, for example, a parakeet or a parrot will do is different from that what a pigeon would do, and it's different from what a crow would do, but they all have their own set of vocalizations that are taught, bird songs that are taught in vocalizations that are used to communicate. And also there are other displays, body language displays and all that. So multiple means of communicating. Vocalization is definitely one of the important components of communication for birds. When it comes to dogs, well, dogs are very familiar to us, right? We know how dogs behave. So dogs also have body language. The tail wags, and the various growls and barks that they do and all that. They Yeah, so they communicate through vocal means, through body language and so on. It's the same thing for all species, even cats and all. Now, when it comes to their intelligence level, it's definitely not as much. They are not as intelligent as we are, as far as we know. Dogs, cats, etc. Uh, Whales, dolphins, elephants may be more intelligent than what we imagine, perhaps. Um, and they certainly would understand at least some signals from other species, because at the end of the day, you live in an environment where you're not the only species, so you have to understand the other species. And some species may be your prey, some species may be your predators, some species may represent a threat for you. You may cooperate with some species, so if you want to cooperate, you have to communicate in some way. So yes, there is cross species communication, definitely, that happens through body language, through vocalization, and through many other means. Okay. What other question do we have? Let's take maybe one more question. Fishball says, how can I change my mindset and personality completely and become a completely different person, a person who is the hero of my own book? Yeah, for that you have to go through a whole process. It's not something that will happen overnight. You first identify what traits currently exist in you, what traits you possess, what characteristics, what capabilities you have. Then you have to identify what you like, what you don't like, what you want to change, what you want to retain. And then you have to identify where you want to go eventually, what you want to become, what kind of better version of yourself do you want to become. And then you have to practice new habits. Change happens through small habits. You have to start new habits and consistently continue them over a long period of time, and eventually you do become a separate person. So it's all about raising your standards. And I've been requested this multiple times to make a video about raising one's standards. So you can't do it in a single video. So I'm going to be making a series of videos, a whole series next year about raising your standards. So yeah, do watch. It'll come soon. Okay, Tejas says, what's the best telescope for a beginner to get if somebody wants to see Saturn? Why seeing Mercury is hard by telescope? Can you suggest some telescopes which are cost effective? I'm sorry, I can't help you with this. I've never had a telescope. As a kid, I always wanted to have one, but somehow or other, I never had one. Today, I can certainly afford telescopes, but I live in a city that's very bright, too much light. So I don't know what's a good telescope. Maybe I can look into it. I will not do it in real time right now. But yeah, what you would want to do is to go to whichever is your favorite online store, whether it's Amazon or whatever, and look at telescopes of various price ranges, whatever is within your budget, and try and find the best telescope within that price range. And how do you find the best telescope? See the star ratings. If it is above 4.5, that's great, but obviously it should have lots of reviews. And then you should see what their capabilities are. Can it resolve Saturn? Can it resolve Jupiter? Can it resolve Mercury? And so on. So that's what you would do. I personally don't have any experience, so I can't say. Sorry about that. Why is it hard to see Mercury by telescope? Because it's a very small planet. It's probably smaller than our moon, and it's so far away, and it's really close to the sun. and you have to be really careful. You don't point a telescope anywhere near the sun; it will destroy your eyes immediately. So, for these reasons, Mercury, it's very hard to see Mercury on a telescope. All right, we have crossed 2 hours 15 minutes. I need to end the session over here today. Um, should I take? There are so many questions. I won't be able to take them. I'm so sorry about that. Anisha says, any tips for Gen Z on what skills to focus on in 2025? Just focus on what skills to focus on. Well, it depends on what kind of career you want to have. But overall, the skill you should focus on is how to learn. Learning itself is a skill. How to learn new things, how to learn things that you are not exposed to, and how to learn those skills quickly. I think that's the in today's world, in today's AI enabled world where everything is changing so rapidly, the one skill everybody needs to have is how to learn new skills quickly. And the other thing Gen Z needs is focus and discipline. So learn how to be focused, learn how to be more disciplined. Because Gen Z, compared to other generations, seems to be a little bit lacking in these things. So I would say the skill you need to learn is how to learn new skills. Secondly, how to be focused. And thirdly, how to be disciplined and work hard. All right. All right. Thank you, everybody, for all the questions. Apologies to those of you whose questions I could not take. And this is the end of the final live stream, the final episode of Ask Abhijit for this year. Next weekend, the first episode of next year will go live. Until then, take care and keep asking questions, keep raising your standards. I'll see you soon next week. Bye.